At first glance, there's nothing special about this tree.
3, 2.
Standing tall in a courthouse square in Arkansas, it looks perfectly ordinary.
We have liftoff.
The kind of loblolly pine you'd find in thousands of southern towns across America.
But this tree has made one of the most extraordinary journeys in the history of life on Earth.
It's traveled nearly 1 million miles through the vacuum of space. It's orbited another world 34 times. It's experienced cosmic radiation that would kill most living things, and it returned home completely unharmed. This tree grew from a seed that went to the moon. And scattered across America are hundreds of trees that joined it, living monuments to human space exploration that most communities don't even know exist.
Because here's the twist. NASA accidentally created one of the largest collections of space artifacts on Earth and then promptly forgot where they put them.
The trees are still out there, growing quietly in parks, outside government buildings, on college campuses, maybe even in your own backyard. Most unmarked, unrecognized, most completely forgotten.
It took a curious third grader asking her teacher a simple question to launch what became the largest treasure hunt in NASA's history.
The story begins with an astronaut who used to jump out of airplanes into burning forests. Before Stuart Roosa piloted spacecraft around the moon, he was a smoke jumper for the US Forest Service.
So picture this. You're 19 years old, parachuting into remote wilderness fires in Oregon and California, armed with nothing but hand tools and the kind of courage that makes you perfect astronaut material.
When NASA selected Roosa for Apollo 14 in 1966, his old boss saw an opportunity. Edward P. Cliff, chief of the US Forest Service, approached his former smoke jumper with an unusual request. Would he mind carrying some tree seeds on his moon mission?
This wasn't exactly cutting-edge science. It was 1971, public interest in moon missions was already fading after Apollo 11, and NASA was looking for ways to capture imaginations. What could be more poetic than bringing Earth's forests along for the ride?
The Forest Service selected 5 seeds representing different regions of America. Loblolly pine from the south, towering coast redwoods from California, hardy Douglas firs from the northwest, sweet gums from the east, and sycamores from the heartland. 500 seeds, sealed in plastic bags, packed into a metal container small enough to fit in your palm. The most widely distributed space experiment in history waiting to happen. But first, they had to survive the journey. On February 5th, 1971, Apollo 14 landed in the lunar highlands. While Alan Shepard hit golf balls into the lunar dust and Edgar Mitchell explored the surface, Stuart Roosa piloted the command module Kitty Hawk in orbit above them.
For 34 complete circuits around the moon, those seeds experienced something no tree ever had. Total isolation from our planet, bombardment by cosmic radiation, and the strange physics of space. 9 days in conditions that should have sterilized them completely.
When Apollo 14 splashed down in the Pacific, the seeds faced their first real crisis. NASA's decontamination procedures were thorough, maybe too thorough. The plastic bags burst in a vacuum chamber, scattering seeds everywhere and exposing them to conditions everyone assumed would be fatal.
The Forest Service collected what they could find and tried germinating them anyway, more from scientific curiosity than hope. But the seeds sprouted. Now, not all of them survived Houston's inadequate greenhouse facilities, but enough grew to prove something remarkable. Life is far more resilient than we imagine.
A year later, the surviving seeds went to proper Forest Service stations in Mississippi and California, where about 450 healthy seedlings began growing. Completely normal trees, indistinguishable from their earthbound counterparts, after nearly 1 million miles through space, they grew exactly as if they'd never left the ground. The experiment had worked beyond anyone's expectations.
But now came the question no one had really planned for. What do you do with 450 tree seedlings that have been to the moon?
America's bicentennial year seemed like the perfect moment to share these cosmic travelers with the nation. NASA and the Forest Service launched an ambitious distribution program, giving away moon tree seedlings as living monuments to American achievement. And the response was overwhelming. State forestry organizations wanted them. Universities competed for them. Government buildings requested them for ceremonial plantings. A loblolly pine even went to the White House, though the southern species struggled in the capital's climate and eventually died.
Trees traveled to Brazil, Switzerland, one was even presented to the Emperor of Japan.
President Gerald Ford sent telegrams to planting ceremonies nationwide. Quote, "This tree is a living symbol of our spectacular human and scientific achievements." For a brief moment in 1976, moon trees were everywhere, capturing imaginations and connecting communities to space exploration. Then something happened that perfectly captures both the ambition and the casual attitude of the 1970s. NASA forgot to keep track of where the trees went.
Think about that. NASA had just completed one of the most successful public science projects in history, distributing living pieces of space exploration to hundreds of communities. And then they essentially forgot to write down the addresses.
Some trees got plaques identifying their cosmic origins. Others were planted with plans to add markers later, plans that were often forgotten. Some communities planted decoy trees first, worried about theft or vandalism, intending to swap in the real moon trees once they were established. Within a few years, as the space program moved on to Skylab and the space shuttle, the moon trees faded from public consciousness. They grew quietly in their new homes, most of them unmarked and unrecognized, their extraordinary origins known only to the few who remembered their original plantings. For 2 decades, hundreds of trees that had orbited the moon grew in plain sight across America, completely invisible.
So the rediscovery began in 1996 with the kind of curiosity that drives all good science. Joan Goebel was a 3rd grade teacher in Indiana who had assigned her students a project about trees in their community. And one student came back with an intriguing discovery. But before I introduce you to the student whose simple question sparked one of the greatest space treasure hunts ever, I want to thank the sponsor of today's video, ZocDoc. Now, managing my own healthcare shouldn't feel like rocket science, but it often does. And as you can tell, I'm actually at home for a little bit, and it's the first time in months I've really been off the road to have time to think about getting a checkup. But I hate finding a doctor. It feels like going to a job interview. So despite all my friends yelling at me, I usually just end up putting it off. And as much as I like to think I'm still in my 20s, I know I probably can't get away with skipping blood work forever. But ZocDoc, today's video sponsor, makes it painless and easy to find a doctor who can help. ZocDoc is a free website that helps you find and book high-quality in-network doctors so you can find someone you love. We're talking about booking in-network appointments with more than 150,000 providers across all 50 states. Whether you're looking for dermatology, dentistry, primary care, eye care, or one of the other 200 specialties offered on ZocDoc, you can easily search by specialty and symptom to build the care team that's right for you. For me, ZocDoc helped me find an in-person appointment with someone who I felt like wouldn't judge me for skipping the last few annual checkups. But if you prefer a video visit, you can do that too. If your regular doctor is booked or if you just moved, ZocDoc can help with all of it. On ZocDoc, you even get a sense of how your doctor is by the thousands of verified reviews left by users on the platform. Appointments made through ZocDoc happen fast, typically within 24 to 72 hours of booking. You can even score same-day appointments. So stop putting off those doctor's appointments and go to ZocDoc.com/parkvibes. It's also in the description below to find and instantly book a top-rated doctor today.
Okay, now that we're healthy, back to the story. So how did that student find out about the mysterious trees in the first place? As it turns out, a tree at the local Girl Scout camp had a plaque calling it a moon tree, grown from a seed that had traveled on Apollo 14.
Now, neither the student nor Mrs. Goebel knew what a moon tree was, but Mrs. Goebel knew who might: NASA.
She found an email address for Dave Williams, a planetary scientist at the Goddard Space Flight Center, and sent him a simple question: what's a moon tree?
Williams didn't know either. Neither did his colleagues. Even NASA's history office could only find a few old newspaper clippings from the 1970s. But Williams was fascinated.
Here was this incredible story from the Apollo era that had somehow been completely forgotten, even by NASA itself. He pieced together what he could from old records and did something that would transform everything. He put the story on NASA's website. At the bottom, he included his email and a request. If you know about a moon tree in your community, please write to me.
Messages poured in from across the country. Forest Service employees who had worked on the original project, citizens who remembered childhood planting ceremonies, groundskeepers who had been maintaining mysterious trees with unusual plaques for decades. And each email led to more discoveries.
Williams found a moon tree at the Kennedy Space Center that NASA employees walked past every day without recognizing. Trees at state capitals and university campuses, a loblolly at Helen Keller's birthplace, a redwood growing in the middle of a neighborhood in Monterey, California.
He found one in his literal backyard.
a moon tree tucked away in a corner of the Goddard Visitor Center grounds, far away from where employees might notice it. The search became a grassroots phenomenon. Williams' database grew to over 100 trees, with citizen scientists sending photographs, GPS coordinates, and condition reports. Some trees had grown into magnificent 60-foot giants. Others had fallen to storms, disease, or development.
And each discovery revealed something about how we preserve or don't preserve our history. Some moon trees were carefully maintained with updated plaques. Others were forgotten curiosities with weathered signs that nobody read.
The math was astounding. NASA had distributed around 420 seedlings, but Williams could only account for about 100. Somewhere in America, hundreds of moon trees were still growing unrecognized.
But one person had never stopped thinking about her father's cosmic forest.
Stuart Roosa died in 1994, 2 years before that third grader's question would spark the great moon tree hunt. But his daughter, Rosemary, understood that those seeds represented more than just a scientific experiment. They were her father's way of honoring the forest he once protected as a smoke jumper.
When Rosemary learned that hundreds of moon trees were lost and forgotten, she decided to continue her father's mission differently. If the original trees were scattered and unaccounted for, well, she'd create new ones.
The Moon Tree Foundation she launched became kind of a biological archaeology project. Rosemary travels to locations where the original moon trees are thriving, carefully collects seeds and cuttings, and then nurtures them into second-generation seedlings that carried the same cosmic heritage as their parents. Working with schools and organizations worldwide, she's planted dozens of these second-generation moon trees, each one accompanied by ceremonies that tell Stuart Roosa's story. What makes her mission particularly powerful is how it mirrors her father's original motivation. Just as he honored his Forest Service colleagues by taking seeds to the moon, she honors his memory by ensuring those trees continue to grow and inspire. But Rosemary wasn't alone in realizing the moon tree's impact. NASA did too and sent a second batch of seeds back to the moon. In November 2022, the Artemis 1 mission launched into the night sky carrying 2,000 tree seeds around the moon, a deliberate echo of the 1971 experiment. But this time, everything was different. The seeds didn't travel in an astronaut's personal kit. They flew as official mission payload, carefully monitored and documented every step of the way. After the capsule splashed down in December 2022, Forest Service scientists immediately took possession of the cosmic cargo and moved them to specialized facilities for germination.
4 of the 5 species remain the same: Douglas fir, loblolly pine, sweet gum, and sycamore. But coast redwood has a somewhat limited natural range and was replaced with giant sequoia, which thrives nationwide.
The careful cultivation began immediately. The Forest Service monitored germination rates, tracked individual seedlings, and maintained detailed databases from day one. But the real revolution was in distribution. Instead of casually handing out seedlings at bicentennial celebrations, NASA and the Forest Service launched a rigorous application process. More than 1,300 schools, museums, parks, and organizations applied for their own Artemis moon tree.
Each application required detailed plans for tree care, educational programming, and long-term maintenance. Recipients had to prove they understood they weren't just getting a tree, they were becoming stewards of space history.
The first 200 seedlings shipped out in spring 2023, each one accompanied by detailed planning instructions, educational materials,
and maybe most importantly, GPS coordinates logged in NASA databases.
By fall, another round of cold-weathered species like the Douglas firs and sequoias joined the program. But perhaps the most powerful aspect of the Artemis program is how it connects past and future. At the Cradle of Forestry in North Carolina, an Artemis seedling will grow alongside a surviving Apollo moon tree, 2 generations of space travelers separated by half a century. And multiple schools received Artemis trees knowing that original Apollo specimens were growing nearby, creating for their students a living library of space exploration. And the treasure hunt continues too. NASA knows original missing moon trees are still out there, and if you want to join the hunt, start looking for the right species that are about 50 years old with small plaques near their base.
And NASA still maintains their database. They're still answering emails from people who think they found a moon tree. This video and you watching it might help the list grow.
What strikes me most about the moon tree story is how it perfectly captures both the grandeur and the humanity of space exploration. On one hand, you have this incredible achievement, taking living seeds on nearly a million-mile journey to another world and bringing them home to flourish. It's proof of life's resilience and humanity's ability to carry Earth's biology beyond our planet.
On the other hand, you have this very human failure, losing hundreds of trees because nobody thought to keep a simple list. But maybe that's exactly what makes this story compelling.
The moon trees weren't created by grand NASA bureaucracy with billion-dollar budgets. They were the result of one Forest Service chief who knew one former smoke jumper who happened to be flying around the moon. Stuart Roosa's gesture was personal, honoring his roots while reaching for the stars. His daughter's foundation continues that personal approach, treating each tree not as a specimen, but as a living connection between families and space exploration.
To me, the moon trees prove that sometimes the most meaningful monuments to human achievement aren't always made of bronze or stone. Sometimes they're made of bark and leaves, growing quietly in our communities, reaching toward the same sky that their seeds once crossed on humanity's most audacious journey.
The search continues. Somewhere in America, hundreds of trees that have been to the moon are waiting to be found again.